The fluorescent lights of Seattle General in Norfolk hum overhead like an electric heartbeat, steady and merciless, as Ashley Cooper moves through the ICU corridors at 0600. Her sneakers are silent on polished linoleum. The antiseptic smell mixes with burnt coffee from the nurse's station, a scent she's learned to breathe without tasting. She's been a nurse for 2 years on paper. In truth, her hands have sutured wounds in conditions most surgeons couldn't imagine. The ICU wakes slowly around her. Ventilators wheeze their mechanical rhythm. Monitors blink their green and amber warnings into the pre-dawn dark. She checks vitals on patients in beds 1 through 6 with the efficiency of someone who has learned to make herself invisible in a profession built on collaboration and noise. But invisibility is a skill. It's also a survival strategy. Bed 7 holds Army Sergeant Marcus Webb. 28 years old. Admitted 3 weeks ago for emergency transfusion following complications from abdominal surgery. His chart shows stable vitals, improving urine output, and a name tattooed on his forearm in black ink. She reads it while checking his 4 rate. Cooper. The letters are clean, precise, military precise. He'd gotten it the night after his blood transfusion, mumbling through morphine about an angel in the desert, about someone who dragged him 5 miles through Ramadi with a sucking chest wound while rounds snapped overhead like angry wasps. His morphine-clouded eyes show no recognition when she adjusts the drip. That's expected. That's necessary. That's the entire reason she's here. Her bag sits beneath the nurse's station desk, tucked behind 2 empty coffee cups and a stack of discharge papers. Inside, pressed between her spare scrubs and lunch container, is the folded flag from Staff Sergeant Daniels. 13 stars visible through the clear plastic where the triangle folds. She carries it everywhere. Has carried it for 8 months now, disguised as a gift for a relative, pressing against her hip like an accusation every time she moves. The mission briefing had been precise. Naval Intelligence placed her at Seattle General 8 months ago to monitor Webb. He witnessed something in Ramadi that made him a target. Something classified enough that the Pentagon couldn't just reassign him, couldn't just send him home. He needed someone watching. Someone trained. Someone who could disappear into a civilian nursing job and become part of the background noise of his recovery. Captain Ashley Cooper was perfect for that. Her discharge papers were immaculate. Her nursing credentials were legitimate. Her past was buried deep enough that no civilian database would ever excavate it. She'd spent 6 years as a field medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment before taking an honorable discharge. 2 years ago, Naval Intelligence had reactivated her. Not officially. Never officially. The nursing job was the mission. The mission was the nursing job. She pulled on scrubs the same way she'd once pulled on body armor. The work was different. The pressure was identical. Webb's oxygen saturation reads 96%. His heart rate is steady at 74. His morphine drip is right. Everything about him is stable and recovering and exactly what a patient should be on a Tuesday morning in the ICU. She makes a note in his chart, her handwriting small and careful, the signature of someone accustomed to staying out of photographs. The sound of footsteps echoes down the corridor before she sees him. Crisp, deliberate steps. The kind of steps that announce arrival before the person does. Dr. Marcus Mercer enters the ICU at 0620, his white coat perfectly pressed, his stethoscope draped like a symbol of authority rather than a tool. He's 54 and spent the last 32 years accumulating credentials and respect and the kind of institutional power that comes from being the right person in the right place for long enough that people forget there was ever anyone else. He scans the ICU with the expression of a general surveying territory he owns. His eyes find Ashley at Webb's bedside and something shifts in his face. Not anger. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Recognition. He approaches the station and speaks to Dr. Chen, the overnight resident, loud enough for Ashley to hear. Who cleared the medication adjustments on bed 7? Chen glances at the chart. Cooper. Nursing staff assessed the pain level and adjusted the morphine drip down by 0.2 milliliters. Vitals support the change. Mercer's jaw tightens. I see. He doesn't move toward the chart. Doesn't ask to review it. Doesn't verify that the adjustment was clinically sound. He simply holds the information like a chess piece he's considering moving. Thank you, Dr. Chen. Ashley feels his attention settle on her like a weight. She doesn't look up. She's learned that the best way to survive scrutiny is to become boring. Small. Competent but forgettable. The kind of person whose presence registers and then dissolves from memory like steam. But Mercer doesn't dissolve. He approaches Webb's bedside, his presence making the air pressure change in a way she can feel in her sternum. He reviews the chart with theatrical precision, moving his finger down each entry as if he's seeing incompetence written in ink. How long has the patient been at this oxygen saturation? He asks. Since midnight, Ashley says quietly. Steady. No fluctuation. And you determined the morphine adjustment was appropriate. The patient's pain level was 7 out of 10. Current vitals support a reduced dose. He's more alert, more comfortable, better able to participate in physical therapy. Mercer closes the chart slowly. He looks at her as if she's just spoken in a language he's decided not to understand. Nursing decisions regarding pain management should involve the attending physician. In the future, adjust nothing without consultation. It's not a request. It's not even really an order. It's the establishment of hierarchy. The reminder of who holds the credentials and who holds the job. She nods once, her jaw steady, and returns her attention to Webb's full line. Mercer continues his rounds, but the ICU has shifted. The other nurses notice it. She catches it in the way they avoid making eye contact when he passes, in the careful distance they maintain from the bed he's selected as his focus. He's identified something in her that he dislikes. The confidence. The independence. The fact that she makes clinical decisions with a precision that belongs to someone who's been trained differently than nursing school teaches. By the time she finishes her shift at 1400, the message has spread through the hospital in the quiet way these things spread. New nurses don't correct attending physicians. New nurses don't make medication adjustments without explicit approval. New nurses, especially ones without prestigious credentials, don't carry themselves with the kind of certainty that suggests they know something everyone else doesn't. She's stocking the supply cart in the medication room when another nurse, someone she'd considered friendly, enters and then immediately exits when she sees Ashley. The moment is brief. The message is clear. Mercer's gravity well is already pulling people into alignment. The small battles within hospital hierarchies are won through accumulated social pressure, through the gradual isolation of anyone who disrupts the established order. She knows how this works. She's seen it before, in different contexts, with different stakes. Ashley finishes stocking the cart in silence. Her hands move with the precision of someone accustomed to doing things under pressure. She thinks about Webb in bed 7. About the operation in Ramadi that had brought them together. About the night she'd carried him 5 miles through hostile territory with rounds snapping overhead and his blood soaking through her uniform in the darkness. She dragged him to the extraction point. She'd saved his life. He'd gotten her name tattooed on his forearm as a thank you and then forgot it 3 weeks later through morphine and medical intervention. That's fine. Some missions don't require the other person to remember. Some missions just require them to survive. But Mercer doesn't know about Ramadi. He doesn't know about the mission. He only sees a nurse who makes confident decisions and carries herself like someone who's been somewhere bigger than a hospital. He sees a threat to the order he's spent decades constructing. And a man like Mercer doesn't ignore threats. He eliminates them. She checks her bag beneath the station desk before leaving for the day. The folded flag from Staff Sergeant Daniels is still there, pressed between her spare scrubs. 13 stars visible through the clear plastic. She'll carry it tomorrow. She'll carry it every day until the mission ends, until Webb is recovered enough that the Navy can move him to a safe house, until whatever he witnessed in Ramadi stops being valuable enough to kill 4. Until then, she'll keep her head down. She'll accept the isolation. She'll watch Mercer's next move and calculate her response. The quietest person in the room is often the most prepared for the moment the room goes loud. She didn't know that Mercer was already drafting emails to the nursing school. She didn't know that his network, 30 years of accumulated allies in hospital administration and credentialing bodies, was being quietly activated. She didn't know that this was only the beginning. The amphitheater at Seattle General holds 40 residents on the rising tiers, 12 attending physicians scattered among them like judges, and Ashley stands against the back wall where the light from the emergency exit sign casts everything in shades of red. Dr. Mercer clicks to slide 17 during grand rounds, his voice carrying the practiced concern of a man who has weaponized worry as an instrument of control. Nurse Cooper's cowboy instincts nearly killed this patient, he announces, pointer tapping the chart projected overhead. The image enlarges, her handwriting, her initials, her name like an accusation on a white screen. She administered vasopressors without physician orders. Made independent clinical decisions that exceeded her scope of practice. This is the arrogance we cannot tolerate from nursing staff. The residents scribble notes. One of them glances back at her. Then another. Ashley does not move. She has stood in observation posts under mortar fire with less composure required than this moment demands. Her hands remain at her sides, palms facing forward, a posture she learned years ago, one that signals surrender without saying a word. Combat medics, Mercer continues, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial timbre, believe their field experience translates to hospital medicine. It does not. He clicks to the next slide. Patient outcomes. Complication rates. All of it curated, all of it designed to paint her as reckless. 2 years of community college does not replace a medical degree. It does not grant authority in an institution that has spent a century perfecting its protocols. Ashley's jaw clenches. A muscle tic that lasts exactly 2 seconds before her face returns to stone. She does not blink. She does not look away. She simply absorbs the words like a sandbag absorbs water, no response, no ripple, no crack in the surface. But the poison is spreading. She can feel it, the way you feel a radio frequency starting to jam your signal. By the time Mercer finishes his presentation, a full 12 minutes of carefully constructed doubt, the residents are no longer making eye contact with her. The attending physicians are exchanging glances that speak volumes about what they believe they've just witnessed. One of them, Dr. Patterson, actually shakes his head. Disappointed. As if she's confirmed something he always suspected. The grand rounds ends at 11:45. Ashley returns to the ICU, documents her morning assessments, and maintains her pace through the hospital corridors with the precision of someone who understands that visibility now equals vulnerability. She does not linger at the nurse's station. She does not join the 1200 lunch group. She eats at the medication computer terminal, a protein bar and a bottle of water, and finishes her charting by 13:30. At 1400, she approaches the third-floor vending machine for another water. Rachel and Jordan are there, both nurses from the night shift she'd worked alongside for the past 6 months. They'd swapped stories about difficult patients, about supervisors, about the small rebellions of people who work in systems designed to break them. Rachel had confided that she was thinking about leaving nursing entirely. Jordan had mentioned her daughter's scholarship application. Normal things. Friend things. Rachel sees her first. Her eyes flick toward Ashley, then immediately toward Jordan. She touches Jordan's elbow, a small gesture, quick as a nerve impulse. Both women turn their backs mid-sentence, mid-thought, and walk toward the stairwell without acknowledgement. The silence that follows is so thick you could operate in it. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like insects trapped in plastic. The vending machine hums its mechanical song. Ashley feeds 3/4 into the machine. Watches the coil turn. Retrieves a protein bar. The wrapper crinkles as she opens it. She does not follow them. She does not call out. She returns to her rounds as if nothing happened, because in her previous life, the one before the hospital, before the cover, before Norfolk, she learned that the only response to psychological warfare is absolute indifference. Show pain and they'll keep cutting. Show nothing and they'll wonder if they're cutting at all. The afternoon stretches. She monitors Webb's vitals, documents his neuro checks every hour, checks his surgical drain for output and color, and speaks to him only when necessary. How's the pain? Any nausea? Breathing okay? The words come out flat, professional, the voice of someone who is exactly as much a nurse as her credentials claim. Nothing more. Nothing less. He watches her with something close to recognition in his morphine-clouded eyes, but his brain is still too fogged to place her. That's good. That's necessary. That's survival. At 18:30, as she's documenting Webb's hourly neuro checks into the computer, GCS-14, pupils equal and reactive, moving all extremities, 2 security guards appear at the ICU entrance. They are not threatening. They are not moving with urgency. They are simply there, and the charge nurse's face goes very still when she sees them. Nurse Cooper, the taller one, says, his voice like a tank idling in a garage, "Dr. Mercer would like to see you in his office." She closes the medical record. Saves the document. Stands. Removes her gloves. "Of course," she says, and the words taste like copper. The walk down 4 flights of stairs takes 6 minutes. She counts them. 0100, 0200, 0300, and so on, each flight the length of a combat corridor, each stairwell a moment where she could slip back into the shadows if she chose to. But she doesn't choose to. She walks straight down, boots making soft sounds on the linoleum, clip, 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 a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. Mercer's office occupies the northeast corner of the 4th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the parking lot and the grey-green Atlantic beyond it. His desk is mahogany, the kind that costs more than most people's cars. Behind it, he sits with his fingers steepled, the posture of someone who believes his thoughts are worth keeping in suspended animation until he decides to share them. "Ashley, come in." "Sit," he says, and it's not a request. It's a command structured as politeness. She sits in the leather chair across from him. The chair is deliberately lower than his. She knows this. Everyone knows this. "I'm concerned," Mercer begins, leaning back slightly, "that you're struggling here at Seattle General. This is a demanding institution. We have standards that are, frankly, quite rigorous." He smiles, the expression of a man looking at something fascinating under a microscope. "Your background, your military experience, it's admirable, truly. But I wonder if you're finding our protocols perhaps too restrictive for someone accustomed to making snap decisions in crisis situations." Ashley's hands rest flat on her thighs. Completely steady. The trembling, if there is any, is pure restraint. "A small clinic," he continues, "somewhere less intense, would likely be more comfortable. Somewhere your independent thinking would be viewed as an asset rather than a liability. Have you considered that option?" The silence lasts 3 seconds. "Then, I'll consider it, Doctor." He nods, pleased. The smile reaches his eyes this time, which is worse. "Good, good. Very wise. Take the weekend to think it over. We can discuss the particulars of your transition on Monday. Perhaps a reference letter, something that emphasizes your dedication." She stands. "Thank you, sir." "Of course." She walks out without saluting, without any gesture of deference beyond what the job requires, and returns to the ICU to finish her shift. 12 more hours of documentation, 12 more hours of monitoring Webb's vitals, 12 more hours of being invisible in the way that matters most, invisible as a threat, obvious as a problem. But the real nightmare is already moving in the background, pieces being organized like chess pieces before a game she doesn't yet know she's playing. The monitor screamed at 0200. Ashley was 3 floors down, restocking the supply room on 2 North when the code blue alarm erupted through the hospital speakers like a warning shot. She knew that tone. She knew what it meant. She also knew, with the certainty of someone who had held dying soldiers in her arms, that whoever was crashing upstairs had maybe 90 seconds before the math stopped working. She moved. The stairwell doors hissed open and she took the steps 3 at a time, her shoes, regulation hospital white, nothing special, nothing that showed the combat boots underneath her locker, hitting each landing with the rhythm of a ticking clock. 4th floor. ICU. The corridor already alive with movement when she arrived, that particular chaos that happens when a patient's body decides to stop cooperating and everyone remembers at once that medicine is just organized panic with beeping machines. Bed 7. Sergeant Webb. She knew it before she saw the name on the door. She knew it the way her nervous system knew a sand dune from 3 kilometers away, the way her hands knew the exact pressure required to apply a tourniquet without cutting off sensation in the fingers. Some things live in your muscle memory so deep that recognition happens before consciousness catches up. Webb's gown was soaked. The color of old rust and copper, the color of how much he weighed in blood, the color of a man running empty. His chest wound, the thoracic repair from 3 weeks ago, the surgical site that Dr. Mercer had ensured she personally monitored with documentation timestamps that proved her constant presence at his bedside, had ruptured somewhere in the valley between sleeping and dying. The dressing was barely holding shape, fabric heavy and dark, and his pressure reading on the monitor flashed in angry red, 50/32 and dropping. "Get me a crash cart," the resident shouted. Dr. Chen, Ashley recognized. Early 30s, steady hands in routine cases, the kind of surgeon who excelled when everything followed protocol. But this wasn't protocol. This was a man exsanguinating faster than the 4 lines could push blood back in. Chen reached for the phone with fingers that trembled like wind chimes in a storm. "What's happening?" he said into the handset, his voice climbing into the register of someone watching a scenario he'd only ever seen on review cases. "I need the attending. Now." Webb's eyes found hers across the room. Recognition flickered there, not memory exactly, because the morphine pump had been running steady for hours, but something older than memory. Something that lived in the autonomic nervous system. His pupils dilated. His hand lifted, just slightly, and his lips moved without sound. "Angel," he whispered. 12 minutes to the OR. That's what the protocol would calculate. 12 minutes to transport, 12 minutes to prep, 12 minutes of watching his pressure collapse, another 15 points because gravity and mathematics don't wait for paperwork. His surgeon of record was Dr. Mercer, who was currently asleep in his house in the suburbs, and the chain of command for emergency thoracic intervention was approximately 9 phone calls long. Webb's pressure hit 48/28. Ashley walked to the crash cart. Not ran. Walked. The kind of movement that looks almost casual if you don't understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. A woman who had once carried a man with a sucking chest wound through 5 miles of urban combat was now walking past 3 residents and 2 nurses without breaking stride. She picked up the scalpel. Just a number 10 blade, standard hospital stock, sharp enough to part skin like water. "What are you doing?" Chen asked. His voice sounded very far away. Ashley opened Webb's surgical site. The blade moved through the sutures like they were made of nothing, her hand steady as a surgical laser, movement so precise they looked rehearsed even though no civilian nurse had ever learned this particular choreography. The internal anatomy opened before her like a map she'd studied in advance, all lived through, which amounted to the same thing from a tactical perspective. The bleeding vessel was right where she calculated it would be. Thoracic aorta, upper descending portion, lacerated cleanly by what looked like suture failure under tension. She reached in with her fingers, her actual fingers, no gloves, because sometimes speed mattered more than protocol, and located the bleed point by feel. "Get me hemostats," she said. Not a request. A command. The voice that came out of her mouth was not the voice of a civilian nurse from Seattle General. It was the voice of someone who had performed similar procedures in a combat support hospital tent in Ramadi with a combat knife when the anesthesiologist was dead and the only thing between the patient and shock was her willingness to work fast and absolutely correct. It was the voice of Captain Ashley Cooper, and she had stopped hiding it. A nurse, Martinez, one of the good ones, thrust hemostats into her hand without hesitation. Some part of the human brain recognizes authority the instant it appears, regardless of what name tag says. Ashley clamped the bleeder. Once. Twice. 3 times, establishing control. The bleeding stopped like someone had switched off a faucet. "Oh, negative, hanging now," Martinez said. "I need 2 units running wide open," Ashley replied. "And call the attending. Tell him I'm doing a temporary vascular clamp until we can get him to the OR." She pressed her palm against Webb's heart, feeling it flutter against her skin like a bird in a cage, and she began to manually compress the organ with the rhythm of someone who had done this before, who knew that the human heart is just a muscle and muscle responds to pressure and timing and the absolute certainty that you will not let it fail. The monitor beeped once. The line on the screen stuttered and climbed. 72/40. "Get me a warming blanket," she said. "Core temperature is going to drop. Bear hugger, full blast. And somebody get me an open surgical tray because if that clamp doesn't hold, we're doing this the right way in the next 10 minutes. Webb's pressure climbed to 84/56. His eyes had closed but his hand still gripped the bed rail with the strength of a man whose body understood it was being rescued, even if his drugged mind couldn't quite process the fact that salvation had arrived in the form of a woman he'd last seen in a dust storm 15 years ago, carrying him toward a horizon he'd never thought he'd reach. The monitor showed sinus rhythm. Not great. Not stable. But alive. Still alive. The kind of alive that could stay alive if everything went right, if the vessels held, if the volume replacement worked, if nobody interrupted her concentration with questions about credentials. "Get transport to pre-op," Ashley said. "Tell them we have a perforated post-op thoracic repair, active hemorrhage controlled, but still critical instability. ETA 5 minutes. She was already moving to the next step, already thinking through the cascade of what came next, already 3 decisions ahead because her hands knew the problem and her brain knew the solution. The resident, Chen, stood motionless by the monitor, his phone still in his hand, his face the color of someone who'd just watched his understanding of hospital hierarchy get torn apart by a woman who was supposed to take orders, not give them. "Did I stutter, doctor?" Ashley asked, not looking at him, not breaking concentration on Webb's vital signs. "No," he said. I'll make the call." The stretcher arrived. 2 orderlies who didn't ask questions, who just moved with the kind of practiced efficiency that suggested they understood the difference between a problem and a solution. Ashley stayed with Webb all the way to the elevator, one hand on his shoulder, the other monitoring his full line, speaking to him in a voice so low only he could hear it. "You're going to make it," she said. "I didn't carry you 5 miles through Ramadi just to lose you in Norfolk. That's not how this story ends." The elevator doors closed. She watched the numbers climb. 3. 4. 5. At the 5th floor, the doors opened again. 2 nurses from the ICU stepped in, their eyes wide, their faces arranged in the expression of people who had just witnessed something that contradicted every assumption they'd made about the woman they worked alongside. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them looked away. Ashley stepped out at the next floor and let the doors close behind her. The silence in the stairwell was so thick you could hear the fluorescent lights hum. The stairwell door clicked shut behind her at 0245, and Ashley descended into silence. By the time she reached the ground floor, her hands had already stopped shaking, if they'd ever started. 12 years of combat taught you that adrenaline was a luxury for people who had time to process fear. She had documentation to finish. The ICU charts waited on the 3rd floor. She moved through the corridor with the same efficiency she'd used moving through Ramadi, purposeful, invisible, leaving no trace. The ventilator wheezed its mechanical rhythm as she reviewed Webb's post-procedure vitals. O2 saturation now 96%. Blood pressure stable at 118/74. Sinus rhythm on the monitor. Her handwriting in the chart was perfectly controlled, each letter precisely formed, the same way she'd filled out combat incident reports while her hand still smelled like copper blood and diesel fuel. At 0300, an orderly mopped past her without looking. At 0315, a resident yawned while checking labs 2 rooms away. Nobody questioned the nurse making notes at the nursing station. Nobody ever did. That was the architecture of her invisibility, competence so efficient it became invisible. But Dr. Mercer was not invisible, and he was not sleeping. The security office on the basement level had already flagged her badge access at 0245. Mercer reviewed the ICU footage at 0320, watching it the first time with his jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. He watched it again at 0350, frame by frame, seeing her hands move with a precision that belonged in an operating theater, not at a bedside. Watching her control bleeding with manual pressure while the resident stood frozen. Watching her call out vital signs and interventions like she'd been trained by someone who'd seen worse than this hospital would ever see. Then he started making calls. The first call went to board chairman Dr. Hendricks at 0400. Mercer's voice was calm, professional, reasonable, the voice of a man protecting his institution. Dr. Hendricks, we have a serious credentialing issue. One of our nurses performed emergency surgery without authorization. I need to convene an emergency meeting before word spreads. Hendricks was awake in seconds, as men accustomed to institutional crises always are. How bad? Career ending for her. Liability catastrophic for us if we don't act decisively. The second call went to Mercy Hospital School of Nursing in Baltimore at 0445. Mercer had prepared his question in advance, delivered it with perfect administrative concern. I'm calling to verify the credentials of one of your graduates, Ashley Patricia Cooper, nursing class of 2022. Specifically, does she possess any certifications in advanced surgical techniques, trauma response, or emergency field procedures? The registrar checked. No advanced certifications. No specialty training. Just RN with standard curriculum. Thank you. This is for compliance verification only. The call lasted 90 seconds and planted a seed. The third call went to hospital attorney Richard Reed at 0500. I need you to review our hospital bylaws and state nursing regulations regarding unauthorized surgical procedures. We may have a practicing medicine without a license situation. I want termination paperwork prepared, and I want documentation of every possible liability exposure before the day's shift arrives. By 0530, Mercer was in the hospital's IT office asking Chief Petty Officer Davis, a Navy veteran who'd worked hospital administration for 3 years, to pull all ICU footage from midnight to 0300. Routine audit, he explained. Patient safety review. Davis compiled the files, burned them to a secure drive, and handed them over without question. Mercer reviewed them once more in his office, watching the evidence of her capabilities in high definition, watching the video proof that he couldn't suppress or deny. Then he did something that would later matter very much. He attempted to copy the files to his personal encrypted cloud account, thinking he could control the narrative if he controlled the evidence. The system flagged the unauthorized transfer at 0532. Davis would check the logs at shift change and make a note. Mercer didn't know that yet. By 0600, 7 phone calls had been made. Institutional pressure was building like a pressure system moving across open water. By 0800, the board chairman had reached out to the nursing director. By 0845, an emergency meeting was scheduled. Ashley finished her shift documentation at 0840, her handwriting steady, her notes precise. She updated Webb's chart with his current vitals, temperature 37.2 Celsius, heart rate in normal range, pain level 4 out of 10 with the morphine protocol. Everything looked perfect because everything was perfect. She'd saved his life with surgical precision in conditions that would have broken most physicians. She'd done her job. Then her pager buzzed at 0843, conference room B. Now. The hallway felt longer than it actually was. Fluorescent lights hummed their monotonous frequency. The air smelled like industrial cleaner and something else, the ozone scent that comes after confrontation, like the air after a lightning strike. Her shoes clicked on the tile. Each sound was a small defeat. Conference room B had one window facing the parking lot. Rain was starting to fall, the kind of cold Norfolk rain that came down sideways in March. Dr. Mercer sat at the head of the table. To his right sat board chairman Dr. Hendricks, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on Earth. To his left, Attorney Reed, expensive suit, expensive watch, the kind of man who'd calculated the hospital's liability exposure at exactly $847,000. The nursing director sat at the far end, her hands folded on the table, her expression carefully neutral. "Miss Cooper," Mercer began, and the pleasure in his voice was barely concealed. "Please sit." "She Saturday. Last night, you performed a surgical procedure on a patient without authorization, supervision, or the proper credentials. A thoracotomy, to be specific. A procedure that requires a physician's license and years of specialized training." He slid a file across the table. "We've conducted a thorough investigation. Your nursing school has confirmed you have no advanced surgical certifications. No trauma training. No credentials whatsoever that would justify what you did." Ashley said nothing. Her jaw was relaxed. Her hands lay flat on the table, palms down. Attorney Reed spoke next, his voice like a calculator working through numbers. "Under State Nursing Code Section 335.017, practicing medicine without a license is a felony. Performing surgical procedures constitutes practicing medicine. The hospital has contacted the State Medical Board and the State Attorney General's office. We are recommending your immediate termination, pending investigation into your falsified credentials." "They are not falsified," Hendrick said quietly. "Her credentials are legitimate. She just performed surgery," Mercer interrupted. "That's the point, Doctor. Protocol exists for a reason. We cannot have individual nurses deciding when to ignore their scope of practice. The liability alone." "The patient would be dead," Ashley said. The room went absolutely silent. Her voice was quiet, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that comes from certainty rather than defensiveness. The rain hammered the window behind them. Mercer's face tightened. "Irrelevant. We have a system. We have protocols. We have physicians to make these decisions." Your physicians froze. Each word landed precisely. The resident could not establish a line. "You were not present. The patient had for minutes before cardiac arrest. I used what was available. I used my hands. The patient is alive. And you violated hospital policy in doing it," Reed said. "The paperwork is here. Termination for cause. Practicing medicine without a license. Failure to follow hospital protocol." Ashley signed the document without reading it. Her signature was precise, the letters exactly formed, the same way she'd signed after action reports and deployment confirmations. She watched her own hand move across the page as if it belonged to someone else. Muscle memory took over. This was not the first time she'd walked away from something she'd built. "You can return your badge and uniform to the laundry facility," Mercer said. "You are not to return to patient care areas. Security will escort you." She stood. "I'll need until 1100 to clear my locker." "That's acceptable," Hendrick said, and something in his voice suggested he was already thinking about the paperwork he'd file later, about how he would distance himself from this decision. The basement laundry facility smelled like industrial detergent cut with steam and something metallic. Huge machines rotated behind glass windows, swallowing scrubs in their mechanical throats. Ashley placed her uniform on the stainless steel counter that ran the length of the room. She'd worn these scrubs for 237 shifts. She knew because she'd counted. She began to fold. Corner to corner. Crease sharp enough to cut. The blue fabric was soft from 1,000 washings, worn at the edges, faded where her badge had rubbed the material near her pocket. She folded the way she'd been trained to fold, combat uniforms pressed into perfect squares, each fold a small act of control in an environment where control was the only thing you had left. Her canvas bag sat on the floor beside the counter. Inside it, at the bottom, was the folded flag. Staff Sergeant Daniel Carmichael's flag. She'd carried it from Ramadi to Norfolk, through 8 months of undercover assignment, through 7 days of what she'd thought was safety. The flag was smaller than it looked, just fabric and meaning, but meaning was a weapon when you knew how to use it. Daniels had died covering her withdrawal in Ramadi. Shot twice in the back while she was running for the extraction point, dragging Webb with a sucking chest wound through 120-degree heat and incoming fire. She'd made it out. Daniels had not. The flag had been presented to his mother by a chaplain in a ceremony Ashley watched from a distance, hands folded, face neutral, the same neutral expression she wore now. She folded her scrubs one final time and placed them in the return bin. Her mission here was over. Terminated. Webb was exposed now, a living witness to her capabilities that Mercer had documented on video, on paper, in formal hospital records. She couldn't protect him anymore. She couldn't protect anything. The Navy would have to extract him, debrief him, relocate him. And she would be reassigned or retired out, her cover burned, her operational value compromised. She walked toward the exit. Each step down the corridor was a step toward the parking lot, toward her car, toward the next assignment, if there even was one. Some missions you didn't survive. This one was over. Then the doors crashed open behind her. Her hand was on her weapon before she could stop it, muscle memory again, but there was nothing to draw. She turned instead of running, because you never ran toward the door. You turned and faced what was coming. 17-year-old Ethan Cooper burst through the staff entrance carrying a shadow box, his voice cracking with the kind of desperation that only children have when they're trying to save their parents. "Mom, they need to see these, you can't let them do this to you." Ashley's mouth opened. No words came out. Ethan burst through the staff entrance at 11:45 Wednesday morning carrying a shadow box, his voice echoing down the corridor like artillery fire. "Mom, they need to see these, you can't let them do this to you." The shadow box was mahogany with a glass front, and inside it lay medals arranged in ascending rows. The crowd formed without anyone deciding to gather. Nurses from the 3rd floor. Residents from trauma. 2 administrators in suits who suddenly appeared in the doorway. And Sergeant Marcus Webb rolling himself forward in a wheelchair, his surgical drain still visible beneath his hospital gown, his face gone pale. Ashley stood motionless beside her emptied locker. Inside her bag, folded against the spare scrubs, her son's school photo pressed against a flag the color of old wine. She didn't move. She didn't reach for the shadow box. She simply stood there the way a sniper stands waiting for the order that hasn't come yet. Ethan opened the glass case. His hands trembled slightly, 17 years old, surrounded by adults, holding his mother's impossible truth in his palms. The first medal caught the fluorescent light. A silver star, its center a woman with a sword. Bronze ribbons. Red and white stripes like dried blood and bone. Ethan lifted it slightly so everyone could see it clearly, and then he set it down and pointed to the next row. "Bronze star," he said, voice steady now. 2 of them. Each one carried its own ribbon configuration. Each one represented a moment when Captain Ashley Cooper had made a choice to run toward fire instead of away from it. The room held its breath. Webb leaned forward in his wheelchair, and when he whispered the words, they carried the weight of a man waking from a coma and finding his savior standing in front of him. Angel 6. That was her call sign. That was what he screamed into the dust outside Ramadi when rounds were cutting through the air like angry insects and she was dragging him across 500 meters of open ground with his chest cavity venting and his blood painting the sand behind them. Angel 6. The designation that meant she was overhead, she was close, she was coming. He had tattooed that single word on his forearm because it was the only memory his morphine-addled brain could hold onto, the sound of someone saying her code name like a prayer. The Marine Corps liaison stepped forward. He was tall, immaculate, his dress blues reflecting the hospital lights like polished armor. His name tape read Halloway, and he had the bearing of a man who had seen things that made peace feel like a luxury item. He took the shadow box from Ethan's hands and opened it fully, facing the crowd so everyone could see the arrangement of medals, the precise ribbon displays, the weight of decorated service. His voice was low, formal, the kind of voice that makes sound systems irrelevant because it carries the authority of ritual. Captain Ashley Cooper, for conspicuous gallantry under fire in Ramadi. single-handedly extracted 3 wounded soldiers through half a mile of active combat in direct enemy fire, provided emergency medical intervention under conditions of sustained hostile engagement, sustained injuries requiring 3 months of surgical recovery, recommended for valor by Commanding Officer, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, Bravo Company. Half a mile. The words hung in the air like shrapnel. 3 soldiers. Not 1. 3. Ashley's jaw remained level. Her hands remained at her sides. She didn't acknowledge the applause that started near the back of the crowd, gathering momentum the way fire spreads through a corridor. Dr. Mercer attempted to interrupt. He stepped forward from where he'd been standing near the administrative staff, his suit pressed, his tie precise, his mouth already forming the words about hospital protocol and appropriate workplace conduct and the irrelevance of military service to civilian medical certification. He opened his mouth. A 2-star general raised his hand. Just his hand, open palm, a gesture that contained the weight of 2 decades of command authority. The general had arrived that morning for what the hospital administrators believed was a routine veteran care inspection. It was not routine. His presence in the building had nothing to do with facility compliance. The hand stopped everything. Conversation ceased mid-sentence. Mercer's mouth closed. The general stepped forward in dress blues that were decorated with ribbons from 3 decades of service, his chest a map of deployments that made most officers' uniforms look sparse by comparison. He rendered a salute. Not a casual acknowledgement. A full salute, fist to chest, held for 2 seconds, then the hand coming down with military precision. The salute was rendered to Ashley Cooper, to captain rank, to gallantry under fire. Every person in that corridor who had served understood what they were witnessing. Every person who hadn't served understood they were witnessing something that transcended hospital hierarchy. 2 Pentagon staffers approached Ashley simultaneously from opposite ends of the corridor. One held a folder marked with a red classified stripe. The other held a phone, the kind that connected directly to networks that didn't appear on conventional phone lists. The staffers confirmed her clearance status. They confirmed her current operational assignment. They confirmed that her presence at Seattle General was not a clerical error or a failed background check. It was a classified federal operation that superseded every credential the nursing board possessed. The hospital IT specialist approached next, moving through the crowd like a man who had carried his burden long enough and needed to put it down. His name was Sanders. He was a Navy veteran, retired, and he had spent 48 hours copying security footage from the hospital's closed-circuit system. He carried a hard drive no larger than a pack of gum. 0530 hours Tuesday, Sanders said, his voice calm and precise. Dr. Mercer accessed the ICU server room. Attempted deletion of footage from Bay 4. Attempted to clear the deletion logs. Encrypted the attempt. I have 63 minutes of footage. Every frame. Every keystroke. Every moment he tried to bury the evidence of what Captain Cooper did. That was the moment the room registered the reality that Dr. Marcus Mercer had not simply attacked a nurse. He had attempted to obstruct federal evidence. He had interfered with an intelligence operation. He had targeted a military officer. And he had left a digital footprint wide enough that a Navy IT specialist could walk it backward to its origins and document every step. Mercer's face went the color of medical gauze. By 1300 hours that same day, Chairman Hendricks suspended him pending investigation. Security escorts removed Dr. Marcus Mercer from the building. His office was sealed with federal evidence tape. His access badge was deactivated. By 1600 hours, 3 nurses filed formal complaints detailing his pattern of intimidation. Rachel and Jordan included dates, times, and the exact words Mercer had used to instruct them to isolate Ashley from patient contact. Each statement was corroborated by saved emails. Each email contained his signature. Each signature was legally binding. By 1800 hours, the State Medical Board received a comprehensive file from the Pentagon's legal office. The file documented Mercer's interference with a federal intelligence operation. It included his attempted deletion of surveillance footage. It documented his contact with Ashley's nursing school to fabricate credential concerns. The IT log showed he had accessed Ashley's personnel file 47 times in 8 months. 47. He had searched for her home address. He had attempted to pull her son's school records. The pattern suggested obsessive targeting. The pattern suggested a man who had recognized a threat he couldn't control and had decided to destroy her rather than accept her existence. By Tuesday, his attorney recommended acceptance of a settlement. Immediate resignation. Surrender of Seattle general privileges. Reassignment to a position with no clinical authority. No mentoring. No influence. No power. On Thursday, Dr. Marcus Mercer reported to his new role as logistics coordinator for a rural medical supply distribution network. He was assigned a white van. Inside the van were bedpans, gauze, catheter kits, saline bags, bandages, all the consumable supplies that hospitals ordered and consumed and never thought about again. He delivered boxes to county clinics across rural Virginia, entering supply rooms through side doors, waiting for someone to sign the clipboard, then leaving without speaking. One afternoon, he pulled into a free clinic and unloaded 3 cases of 4 bags. A nurse practitioner signed for the shipment without looking up from her clipboard. She didn't see him. She didn't acknowledge him. She didn't even register his face. He was invisible. Completely and utterly invisible. It was the exact fate he had tried to impose on Ashley Cooper, the erasure of her presence, the denial of her competence, the reduction of her existence to irrelevance. He drove to the next clinic. 2 weeks later, Ashley Cooper returned to Seattle General's ICU in clean scrubs, her badge access fully restored, her nursing credentials officially confirmed. Her locker contained both her credentials and a framed photograph of Ethan in his high school ROTC uniform, standing at attention, already becoming the kind of person his mother had always been. She checked on Webb during morning rounds. His surgical site was healing perfectly. No complications. No infection. His strength was returning daily, physical therapy progressing faster than the textbooks predicted it would. She adjusted his footpole with the same precision she had used to stabilize his chest cavity with combat gauze and pressure dressings 5 miles outside Ramadi. Webb looked up from his exercises. "I got your name tattooed because I couldn't remember your face. Only that someone named Cooper saved my life. Never imagined you'd actually show up." "The mission isn't over until you testify," Ashley said quietly. "I'll be here." General Vance visited that afternoon, presenting her with an official commendation for maintaining operational security under extreme duress. Her assignment was extended indefinitely. She was to remain at Seattle General, continue monitoring Webb, and prepare him for the testimony that would help prosecute the individuals who had ordered his assassination in the first place. The folded flag remained in her bag beneath the nurse's station, hidden between spare scrubs and her lunch container. Staff Sergeant Daniels had believed that some fights required you to be underestimated. Some victories looked like silence until the moment they didn't. Rachel and Jordan approached her at the vending machine during afternoon break. Apologies stumbled from their mouths like soldiers retreating from a position they couldn't hold. But Ashley simply nodded and returned to her rounds. Forgiveness was a luxury. She was still working. At 1900 hours, as she documented Webb's progress notes, he asked the question that mattered. "Why nursing? You could have stayed in uniform. Kept your rank." She considered him across the chart, this man whose life she had held in her hands twice now, once in the dust and once in the operating theater. Then she closed the chart. Because sometimes the bravest warriors carry stethoscopes, not guns. The ICU lights hummed overhead. The monitors beeped their steady rhythms, each one a heart still fighting, still living, still refusing to accept defeat. Captain Ashley Cooper continued her mission in the only uniform that mattered now, the one that let her stay invisible, stay close, and keep the promise she made 5 miles outside Ramadi, never leave a soldier behind. If you've made it this far, you already know that real strength looks nothing like what the world expects. Subscribe for more stories about the warriors nobody sees. Like and comment below. Have you ever been underestimated by someone who had no idea who they were standing next to?